Your baby's mind is growing even before they arrive. The more you talk and sing and play, the more their mind will thrive. You gotta talk with your baby, play with your baby, read to your baby, make out you're a lion. Talk with your baby, play with your baby, read to your baby. Your words will grow their mind.
Well, hello and welcome to the Words Grow Minds Parent Podcast. We bring you the experts who can decode what's happening in your baby's brain and give you practical tips on how you can help them to thrive.
And we promise to do this without adding to the ever-increasing parental load.
I'm Kate. I'm a mum of two and a long-term passionate believer in the importance of early childhood.
And I'm Amelia. I'm mum to Grace, who's 5, and Ted, who's 1. And fun behind-the-scenes trivia here. I actually showed up an hour early to this session today. So, who knows what could happen from here, Kate?
It's organised. I like it, Amelia. I like it.
Unusually so.
Well, today we've got a bit of a different pod. We've been wondering lately about different countries and cultures and how they think about the early years. Which countries are getting early childhood education and development right? What can we learn from their different cultural practices? What are we doing well at? What can we lift our game in?
It's an interesting proposition, and I was quite shocked to find out recently that kids in Finland don't start school until they're 7. But that's because they have an incredible universal childcare and preschool system that every child is entitled to, and it's focused on play and it's mostly outdoors.
Well, today we have a global tour guide and her name is Ana Nieto, someone who's dedicated her incredibly impressive international career to early childhood policy around the world.
Ana has 20 years' experience working at the highest global policy levels for children's agencies and foundations, including UNICEF and Plan International. She's now based in Perth as Director of Early Years at the Minderoo Foundation, which has been successfully advocating why the early years matter, and it works to improve outcomes for disadvantaged children.
Ana, thank you so much for being with us and welcome to the Words Grow Minds Parent Podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Now, I don't know if it's too early to start off by telling you that I love you, but I do love your passion and your experiences around the world where you have dedicated so long to early childhood. You've lived in many different countries and have been involved in early childhood development for over 20 years. I do love you, Ana. I do. Thank you for your service.
It's mutual.
Oh, this is great. Let's just end it here. This has gone perfectly. I did, though, want to ask, though, what have you observed about parenting babies around the world? How much of it is the same? How much is different? What are your general observations?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. And I think the answer has 2 parts. So the first one is that all children need the same to thrive. We actually know that after decades and decades of neuroscience evidence. We know that children need healthy environments. All children need proper nutrition. All children benefit from early learning and stimulation and responsive caregiving. I have loved previous episodes when you unpack that serve and return and the responsive interactions. All children need that. All children need to be protected from harm and abuse and neglect. And also all children need to feel that sense of belonging and cultural identity. That's universal. If we want children to thrive, all of them need that. The second part of the answer is there are many ways in which those needs can be met. There are many different ways in which caregivers around the world can provide that. And that is what is informed by context and by cultures. One interesting traditional practice, if we could use that word, is intergenerational parenting. And what I love about intergenerational parenting is that it has been practiced in so many regions around the world. It has been practiced in Latin America, in First Nations communities, actually here in Australia, in Africa, in countries like Japan, like Italy, like Spain. I actually grew up in intergenerational parenting settings, and I can actually remember with a lot of love what it meant to have extended family around us and feel that we were a little village all going together and that my mom and my dad were not alone in this journey of parenting me and my sisters. So the beauty of that approach is that it does a couple of things. One thing is that it makes parents don't feel overwhelmed and exhausted. They get that emotional and practical support when they need it the most. And everyone that is a new parent knows what it feels like to be sleep deprived and feeling that everything is coming at once. It decreases stress levels, it supports their mental health, and it makes them feel connected. That sense of not feeling isolated is very important. And then it also does a beautiful thing in terms of passing traditions and language and culture. So if there is one traditional practice that comes to mind that I think it would be great in a way to try to recreate is that intergenerational parenting and the support that comes with it.
I think that Australian parents, whilst you were talking then, I was like, yes, bring on the village, bring them all in, come and help me.
Yeah.
But I think there's also a question around maybe that where that hasn't been the tradition in our communities, a question of guilt, that I'm the parent, I'm the mother. If the grandparents or the aunties or uncles or others are taking on a lot of that load, does that mean that I'm not doing my share? But do you think that from a child's point of view, that there are impacts around the bond that you would develop with parents as opposed to having this wider circle of people loving and helping raise you?
Yeah, that's an interesting angle. I actually think it's very beneficial for children to feel love. The more love that they get, the better. The more responsive interactions, the better. So if you, as a parent, have a very demanding job, most parents are time poor, and you have other members of the community or your friend group or family members that can provide that extra pair of hands, an extra set of play for children, it can only be beneficial for the child. And I think the other element of that is that sometimes when we are exhausted, we might not be at our best. So for children to be exposed to different energy levels and different ways of responding is actually a protective factor as they develop.
See, that was your question there, but interestingly, I feel like a lot of my friends who, we've all got young kids are probably going, where is the village and how do I get there? Well, what are you seeing, Ana, in other countries where perhaps the village isn't present, but at a policy level, those countries are doing it well to support parents?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So there are a couple of favorite countries that I have.
Oh, let's go on, call them out.
Favorites, I have to say. So I'm a big fan of the Scandinavian countries, and I love that you guys actually started the podcast by talking about Finland. So yeah, for all the reasons that you mentioned, the Scandinavian countries are ahead of the game in a way because they provide parents with time, for example, which is very scarce. And how do they provide them with time? With very generous paid parental leave policies. And one country in particular has really gone the extra mile and been very creative in recreating that intergenerational support, and that is Sweden. So in Sweden, parents get 480 days for paid parental leave that they can share among themselves. But then a couple of years ago, they went one step further and said, what if we give 45 days of those 480 to the grandparents?
Oh my gosh, could you imagine that happening?
Ana, I'm worried that there are parents packing their bags right now. They're listening to this and they're like, right, that's it.
Could you imagine that? Because, here in Australia, obviously the age that you could retire blew out between, our parents and their parents, if that makes sense, and now where we're at now. So, I can remember growing up, my nana retired at 50, whereas with both my parents still work full time. But being able to put that to them would just be incredible.
Yes. So it's recognizing the role that they play and compensating them for their time and telling to families, it takes a little village. So we're going to support you in creating that. Another example that I love is Singapore. So Singapore, apart from doing a lot of the things that the Scandinavian countries do in terms of quality services and paid parental leave and all those things, they have housing policies that encourage these multi-generational living arrangements. So they have one grant, it's called the Proximity Housing Grant, that actually gives financial assistance to new families to buy properties that are close to their relatives, including grandparents.
Just imagine that what that would do to family? Because, you get stuck. You want to live in your community, but in terms of affordability, you might have to go half an hour away from where you're used to, and that makes it really hard.
Exactly.
This is groundbreaking, Anna.
It's interesting that these countries do it because at the core they see raising children as a collective responsibility. They see it as part of nation building. They are not doing it because it's a nice thing to do. They are doing it because they understand the prosperity and the social cohesion and equality that comes when you actually support children to develop and reach their full potential. So they're doing it strategically.
Well, can I ask a question about that? Often we'll say that early childhood has not had the traditional focus from policymakers, that, we're not having 3-year-olds lining up to vote. Then they don't get a say for a long time. So in terms of priorities where government might focus, do you have any tips on how we get government to prioritise to that extent, that they're introducing and spending a lot of money on these policies, which would not be cheap, but as you said, are long-term strategic priorities?
My dream is that we get to a point where the amazing evidence that exists out there, that is right now in neuroscience labs, into universities where Nobel Prize winners have talked about the return of investment of early childhood, when you bring all that science into the living rooms of Australian families, into the barbecue conversations that people have, into the way that public spaces are designed so caregivers can actually access green spaces and playgrounds and have proper transportation to get to services. So it's that idea of how can we make sure that the amazing science that we have for early childhood is not a well-kept secret, but it actually becomes part of what people care about, what people talk about, what people understand, and what people demand from their policymakers.
Because I think Anna is advocating compulsory listening to the Words Grow Minds Parent podcast.
Anna,
that's it.
Anna, I've got a barbecue at the weekend. It's a 5th birthday party. Can you give me, this is a bit of a rogue question, but maybe a few truth bombs that I can just drop at this party to just really plant some seeds here?
Oh, great. So I think you do a very good job in your podcast to actually draw those key nuggets of wisdom. But for example, those ideas that baby's brain develop 85% by age 3. A lot of my friends didn't know that. So that alone is kind of a big fact that people don't understand how valuable these early years are. The fact that actually the highest return of investment in any intervention has been proven to be in the early years. And actually there is a Nobel Prize winner. His name is James Heckman from the University of Chicago, who has spent his entire life proving to governments that you would never get more return of investment in any other intervention than in the early years, and that actually when you invest in the early years, you avoid paying billions of dollars into other services and remedial interventions at later points in life. Another fact that I love is that to support the idea that early childhood interventions and the support to parents and children set them up for success at school, at work, and in life, there is an amazing study from Jamaica that shows that children that have received that responsive support and responsive caregiving actually make 25% more in wages later in life. So it's proving that it's not just important because children are developing properly, but they are going to be more successful individuals in their own careers, and you are going to have a more productive workforce. Not sure if I gave you 5.
That's great. I've jotted down mentally those key facts, and I plan to certainly drop the Jamaica study at this barbecue on the weekend. Anna, going back to, we've obviously talked about, some of the Scandinavian countries. What are we doing here in Australia that parents can perhaps access to perhaps recreate a village? I know you talked about some great incentives there and in Singapore, but what are some things that perhaps parents might not know exist here that can help recreate that?
Yeah, so actually, not being Australian, one of the things that really impressed me when I arrived is the first-time parenting groups. And Australians should actually feel very proud of that and know that that is one of those examples that globally people talk about.
Wow.
Because it is a very tangible way of making sure that parents don't feel isolated and that they create a system of support when they are becoming parents for the first time. And then you also have playgroups, which can also be very, very important for parents in those formative years. And you also have a lot of cultural activities and different organizations that are doing interesting things to provide that connection and support to families. Like, for example, going to a library that is organizing story time.
I love
and
the
I'm
library.
Sure that you guys would love that one. But it's taking advantage of the community activities that are there that are providing you with those opportunities to actually learn from other parents and create those networks of support. And then you also have services. Australia is doing a great job in trying to ensure that you have equitable access of early learning opportunities for children. And then you also have child and maternal health nurses that are supporting families. So actually, you do have very good building blocks for wrapping up around families.
What's on your wish list, Ana? What would you like to see in the next 5 years?
Oh, I would really like more people to understand the science of early childhood development and be able to talk about it with their friends, as I said, in the barbecues, and mobilize to support the early years. And there are different ways that you could do that. So you could be part of community consultations when different projects or priorities are being discussed, or you could join parent networks that are advocating for this issue. I'm not sure if you guys have come across an organization called Parents for Climate. They are actually mobilizing parents to use their voice in order to convey to policymakers that a healthy planet is a prerequisite for the children to thrive. So it's finding those opportunities to acknowledge that even though babies don't vote, parents do vote and parents have a voice.
Now, Ana, we talked about, you've worked in some amazing places with some amazing organisations overseeing early childhood programs across a huge part of the planet. You've moved to Australia. You've shared some observations about what we're doing well and what some other countries are leading on. But you're not just coming out here to observe. You're coming out here and you're working with Minderoo to bring about some new programs and some new focus and some new investments. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what work you're supporting and what it is that you're looking for to really take Australian early childhood and support for parents to the next level?
Yeah, so I think I'm privileged to have the opportunity to work with an amazing team that is trying to make early childhood development a key component of the Australian society, so that recreation of that village. And one of the key things that we are doing is understanding that even though all children need the same inputs to thrive, it's very important to support place-based interventions. And by this, I mean not assuming that we know what communities need, but actually working closely with communities, with deep listening, with humility, to empower them to be able to identify what are the things that they want their children to achieve and what are the best way to respond to those cultural needs. Through that, we've been supporting different communities in Australia to be able to strengthen the services and the support to parents. We are also working with great organizations, including Words Grow Minds, to find creative ways of disseminating this neuroscience in ways that are practical and easy for parents to do. Kate, you know that one of the great examples that I like from overseas is the work that the Clinton Foundation has been doing with a program called Too Small to Fail. And in a nutshell, what they have done is to try to really be creative and find parents where they are. And they found that in the US, in their target communities where Latino parents were most of their free time, it was in laundromats. So they partnered with the Association of Laundromats to completely transform those spaces and put a learning corner and a reading corner and different play activities. And now parents love going there. It's a time that they treasure. And the business owners love it too, because they can actually have something unique about the service that they are providing. Another thing that they did is that they are working with Hollywood to make sure that all these amazing messages about the importance of talking and thinking and singing and playing with your baby are actually embedded into a lot of the TV shows that you watch. So for some of your listeners that like Law and Order or Orange is the New Black, you've probably been exposed to a lot of those messages without knowing, and also the role modeling that comes with it. So I think in Australia now we're trying to find ways with organizations like yours to be creative and find ways to disseminate this information in ways that are easy for parents to absorb, but also in ways that start creating a common language among the public to value the early years and to act in support of the early years.
This is fascinating.
So interesting, isn't it?
I love Law and Order.
Well, I was thinking, so we basically need to start writing home and away scripts, I think, is the message there.
I think we can mail them some ideas. Anna, thank you so much. We're going to take a really quick break. Kate, that was such a good question. And we're going to come back with some more research truth bombs from Anna. You've got some incredible knowledge on the research that's on the go, but also more on what we can do to spread the word about investing in the lives of our little ones. We'll be back after this quick break.
Your baby's mind is growing even before they arrive. The more you talk and sing and play, the more their mind will thrive. Every time you interact with your child, you're helping grow their mind. For more information, visit wordsgrowminds.org.au.
Okay, well, welcome back. Now, Anna, we talked earlier about children around the world all need the same things. They've all needed those same things for forever and a day. But there must be new trends, new trends that are emerging or policies that are coming forward. Can you talk to us about emerging issues or trends when it comes to early childhood?
Yeah, so there are two key trends that I have seen in the last couple of years. So one is the recognition from neuroscience that what we probably suspected all along, that children don't develop in a vacuum. They develop as part of their proximal environment. And that's why that concept of it takes a village is so important. But if we take it even closer to the child, is that concept about we have to care for the caregivers. We have to care for the parents. They need support. And when we support parents, we are protecting children. And then the other key element that I've seen in the last couple of years is understanding, as I mentioned before, that we need a healthy planet for our children to thrive in. So more and more research is being produced now that really explain in simple ways the impact that climate change is having in the health and development of our children. And since you guys like facts, maybe I can use a couple here. Mm-hmm. So one is that children are the most affected by climate change. And the reason is because their bodies and their minds are still developing. So children actually breathe faster than adults, and they are closer to the ground, which means that they are inhaling more particles of pollution relative to their size than adults. So the impact of air quality pollution is higher on children. The same with extreme heat. So more and more countries around the world are starting to say it's not enough to talk about climate because it's going to affect our economy or because it's not going to improve our standard of living or national disasters, but it is about we need to protect the environment in order to make sure that the brain development and the health of our children actually is at the center of the conversation.
Yeah, similar notion, but at a much more local level. We've also, in the time that you've been working in early childhood development, seen the urbanisation of many countries and cities. We've seen population growth. Here we're talking all the time about urban infill, less open spaces, higher buildings. And surely that has an impact on the children growing up in those environments compared to the generations that went before them. And is there something we should be doing to counter that?
Yes. So I think that another trend that is very important is that many countries around the world are bringing urban planners into the conversation about the early years. And there is actually an initiative by the London School of Economics that is called the Urban 95 program. And they are training hundreds of cities around the globe to understand how they can design their services, their transportation systems, their housing, their green spaces from the perspective of a little creature that is 95 centimeters above ground. That's why it's called urban 95, because 95 centimeters is the average height of a 3-year-old. So they are actually global perspectives and movements that are trying to empower policymakers with the how do we do this? How do we create these inclusive public spaces and housing developments that are going to protect the health and development of our children?
Ana, you also talked about obviously caring for the caregiver. What is research telling policymakers and what are you gleaning from research? How are caregivers in Australia feeling at the moment?
So that is interesting. One of the things that we are supporting at Minderoo Foundation is additional parenting surveys that are going to allow policymakers to really understand what parents are dealing with. You actually already have a great survey that is called the Parenting Today survey in Victoria, and it provides very good information, and we want to replicate that in other states. One of the things that have come out very clearly in those surveys is the mental health issues that parents are facing. And specifically, fathers have actually highlighted that they need additional support in that area. So I think acknowledging that parenting is not a solo act, that parents need support, and that you need to prioritize their physical and mental well-being is something that many countries around the world are actually seeing as a very important component of their early childhood development. So it's not just playgrounds, it's not just making sure that there are childcare services around the families. It's about helping that caregiver, because that's what the magic happens. You have to strengthen that caregiver to be able to provide that nurturing care to their children.
So interesting. Isn't it so interesting?
Yeah, it is. It is, but it's also, it just makes perfect sense, doesn't it? What are some things that you're excited to see come to fruition in Australia in the next couple of years that you know are in the works?
Yeah, so I think the progress that has been made in recent years in terms of creating quality, equitable access to early childhood learning and care opportunities for children is inspiring. And I hope that keeps advancing and that we get to a place where those quality services are available to all families. And when they are available to all families, that includes families that are living in remote situations or that have different family structures. And at the same time, that we are advancing in providing more and more support for those caregivers, and that is not seen as a nice to have, but as a key component of any policy provision.
Our final question, Ana, that we ask to every guest that comes on this show is, knowing all that you know in your field, and yours is a very extensive knowledge base, what is the one thing you just wish parents knew?
Well, I think that they know this, but I just want to kind of echo what they already know, which is when parents are overwhelmed, kids feel it, even if we try to shelter them from that. So it is very important as caregivers and parents that we know that it is okay and necessary to prioritize our own physical and mental well-being. And there are things that we could do in our daily routines, like trying to incorporate some exercise. As I said before, parents are time poor, but perhaps they can find an opportunity to go for a walk as they are pushing the pram, and then they are outdoors. Actually playing with children has been proven to improve the mental health of parents. So being silly and running around and playing with your child is going to be amazing for their brain, but it's going to be amazing for your own mental well-being. And then for parents that are dealing with financial stressors, relationship stressors, life happens as we are parenting. It is okay to ask for support and to know that actually with this concept of it takes a village, you are entitled to that system of support around you. It's not because you are not able to parent that you need that help. It's actually something that we know is needed and is something that everyone has to provide to that parent.
And I hope that is the prompt that anyone listening needs, and that gets them going in the direction they need to go. Thank you so much, Ana.
Ana, it has been fascinating to speak to you and to hear of your experiences and your observations from around the world. We're so very lucky to have you both on the podcast, but also welcome to Australia. We hope that you are very happy here and that we get to tap into all of your decades of experience and try and create the best environment for children being born and growing up in Australia. And thank you so much for sharing that knowledge with us.
Oh, no, thank you for having me. It was an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
Kate, my mind is blown by how many facts we just had in that podcast and how many just different things are going on around the world that support parents. What was one of the things you loved in this chat?
Oh, I loved the chat. I find her so interesting, her experiences, around the world, what she's seen, what she's learnt from that, and the fact that she's now bringing that back to Australia is amazing. But actually what I really loved is, we talked a lot about amazing things happening in other countries, but I hadn't really appreciated the amazing things happening here. I didn't know that mothers groups were not done everywhere. Like that's amazing that we've come up with that that we've got play groups, which are an amazing asset that people can go and use and meet other families and make those connections. I thought it was really nice because I got to a point where I was like, why can't I have all of these other things? That it was nice. It was nice to also recognise that we've done some pretty amazing things ourselves. What about you?
I loved how she really focused at the end there as well on how what's that thing they tell you on planes? You've got to put your mask on yourself before, helping anyone else. And you are not, you want to be your best, but you've got to invest in yourself as well. And I am absolutely by no means an expert here, but I hard relate to that. I remember when I'd first gone back to work after having my daughter Grace, and like I work in TV, and I remember one of my colleagues telling me, Amelia, we can see you reading your script because I have to memorize a lot of what I do. And she's like, I can see you looking down at your notes a lot. But this was at a time when I was just I actually wasn't really keeping my head above water. It was, a big juggle. My daughter wasn't sleeping, all those things. And I remember that turning point just being like, no, I got to work out what I'm missing here and really noticing, okay, well, I need some sleep. So I'm going to have to get on top of this. I'm not prioritizing eating well. I'm literally eating the crust from my daughter's breakfast for breakfast, like just silly things like that, which just going, no, this is actually quite a thing. I need to really knuckle down and make sure that I'm looking after myself. There's one of me. I wish there was more. Looking after myself with these sort of key pillars in my life that were down. And then just talking to my husband and being like, I need to exercise. I need to do something. I need to get out of the house. And I'm very fortunate that I have a really supportive partner. But doing those things, I know made me a better parent.
Absolutely. And isn't it amazing that someone who has dedicated their life to early childhood and the research about what matters says that the one thing she wants parents to know is that you got to care for the carer, that is the priority.
Yep.
I think that's a really big reminder to parents everywhere that it's okay to prioritise ourselves and our well-being.
It's okay to accept help, or for the parents who are like me out there, it is okay to ask for it.
Yeah. Well, I want to get her back. Let's talk to her some more. I have so many more questions and I think she's got so much knowledge to share, but I really love that episode.
Oh, that brings us to the end of today's episode. Thanks once again to Ana Nieto, and we'll see you next time for more Words Grow Minds.
Thanks for listening to the Words Grow Minds Parent Podcast. We love hearing from you, so please subscribe, review and comment on the podcast. And for plenty of ideas to support your child's development, go to wordsgrowminds.org.au and follow us on Facebook and Instagram.
Your words will grow their mind.